Please, we did not realize that touching on a sensitive subject that still exists to this day of a basketball team leaving your town can be taken very personal. We like to apologize and realize that this is not the way to get the best nuclear heat, but good to know that it still exists. And with that said, hopefully we can return the next time and will not hold this against us, as we done messed up here. And just want to say thank you for coming out and wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Thank you. Can you hear me in the back there? You might forget. Welcome to the JM Report. I am your host, IAmGoodOlJM, episode 29, coming to you from CSB Studios in Tampa, Florida, the birthplace of pro wrestling. And as you just heard, well, I wasn't exactly at Raw in Seattle, but Elias and Kevin Owens was, and they got the absolute best reaction in a very long time, at least from what I can remember. And turns out, and I hope they don't do too much of this, because then kind of puts the anti-bully campaign in a whole scramble. But apparently, the fact that the former NBA team of the Seattle Supersonics, after they left Seattle, it's still a bit of a sore subject for many fans. And you know what? I do not hold that against them. They're very passionate about their basketball, and it shows. Maybe there was more detail than first led to believe as far as what led to that decision that only those in Seattle will be aware of. But it sucks when that happens. I know it hasn't happened in many decades, but I know when the Brooklyn Dodgers left New York, a lot of people were in the uproar. Then they moved to Los Angeles. Then we ended up having two teams for football and basketball. And now we have two teams for football and baseball. And most recently ended up with two teams for basketball. So if one leaves, I guess we still have the other. But going by individual statuses and statistics, I guess that's where the argument begins. But anyway, taken away from what happened this past Monday night, I think is one of the best reactions, as I said, and of course it took two heels to do so. I mean, I didn't time it, but from what I read, it might as well have been as long as 10 minutes, although some who have time there was saying more closer to about 7 minutes. Either way, that is a long time compared to an ovation given to, say, Hulk Hogan back in 2002, I believe it was, when he was in Toronto for Smackdown. And the fans, we ended up seeing the edited version. And the fans would not let up, just giving this man a standing ovation to a point where it drove Hogan to tears. He even pointed out to the microphone, hey, I want to say something, but they just got louder and louder. That was, again, from what we saw, was edited, but that had to have been a legit 10 minutes, if not more, on SmackDown. I've never seen the unedited version of it. I would love to one day. It's just one of those feelings that we all don't get to experience. Even if we're graduating from high school or college, for example, you get a round of applause, but a standing ovation, for as long as that long. Oh man, we had the complete opposite this past Monday night. So I bet anything they're gonna go with this. So that's what we got to do. We got to hit him where it hurts. We got to take personal shots and hit sore subjects. Of course, every town is different, and you got to research exactly what that would be. But I think after a while, it's gonna get repetitive, and it's almost. I mean, there was an argument during the week whether or not this was declared cheap heat, and you know what? That probably was the intention, but no way, no chance, and no time that anyone would predict the reaction that they ended up getting. Absolutely. My point to all this, well, similar to my mockery in the beginning, what they got to do. And mind you, Kevin Owens and Elias, they're already heels, at least officially. Elias would get a few chants here and there. Of course, Who Wants to Walk with Elias chant. And he does get a few cheers here and there overall. So it's kind of 50-50 at best. Kevin Owens, well, we all know he can be full heel the rest of his career. And I think he's much better at that. But for something like this where, well, like if you look at Mick Foley, and he definitely goes for the cheap pops, like right here in Seattle, Washington, and everybody cheers. And the show's already halfway through, and he's reminding us where we are and plugging the town. Like, yeah, that's our hometown. Yeah, we're on TV. And oh man, but this was a whole different monster in itself. If anything, they should follow up on this. But again, it's gonna lead to questionable tactics, if you will, of how they're going to get there. Now, I'm sure it has been suggested that you got to go in topics or subject areas that might hit a little too close to home. Now, I'm not saying anything that broke in the news that ended tragically or whatever. We all know what's his name. He took a shot at Kobe Bryant. Oh my God, on ECW. What the hell was his name? Abraham something. And that was still fresh in the news. And apparently that was unscripted, on the fly, because he had a live microphone while the match was going on. And he took a shot at Kobe, and it's like, too soon, or you shouldn't have gone there. And he ended up getting fired. So obviously nothing like that, but something much more low-key, like something like this. I mean, something where at the end of the day, someone's going to say, well, get over it. They left town. You got to move on. You got this new team. If they do, I don't follow Seattle news or sports that much. But I know the Supersonics are no longer there. And many fans, and they have the right to hold on, to clinch on, thinking that maybe one day whatever team in whatever sport can make it to the big time, to the big game, and put the city back on the map, so to speak. But in hindsight, I just hope, at least as far as the Raw creative team, and I use that term very loosely, they come up with something to follow up with this, especially after Super Showdown, which is just hours away. Matter of fact, less than 12 hours, at least by Eastern Standard Time rules, as they will go live at 5 a.m. about 15 hours from now, give or take, 15 and a half hours from now, they'll be live. I ran down the lineup last week thinking that I probably won't discuss it this time around. If you want to go back and listen to it, I'll appreciate it. But my only update on it is Liv Morgan, who did reappear on Raw this past week, obviously in a non-physical or combative position. But she was ringside when Ruby Riott took on Ronda Rousey. Pretty good match. Ruby ended up getting a lot out of Ronda this time around. And as time goes on, Ronda is improving on her timing, which was always my number one concern, her timing. Her selling, I knew, will always be there because she's very expressive. She's very emotional, as many of you have known, after her first loss in the UFC to Holly Holm. So that was not a concern. My timing was, I guess the timing, a combination of the timing and her selling. You don't want to sell too soon, too early, because your timing was off, or vice versa. But I think Ronda's done a great job with that. And speaking of Liv Morgan, apparently she was cleared. She was cleared during the week, as she was kept under close not surveillance, but observation of whether or not she can make it to Super Showdown for the 6-women tag team match between all members of the Riot Squad, taking on Ronda Rousey and the Bella Twins. So it's good news. Probably the initial reports, at least the bits and pieces we were given, appear to be not as serious as first thought, but Liv Morgan legit did suffer a concussion and was taken off, not the road, but at least taken off in-ring schedule to, better safe than sorry, to avoid any further damage. But before that happened, Liv Morgan did issue a short little sweet statement or message to her followers on Twitter in her first post since being knocked out by Brie Bella last Monday night, or now 2 weeks ago, that the WWE Universe has been sending positive messages to Liv Morgan ever since the incident occurred, with some reports suggesting that it could be leading to Liv Morgan missing out entirely of Super Showdown this weekend. But Morgan would tweet out, "Y'all think a little kick to the face would keep me down? Did you?" So the update is, while we knew Liv Morgan had received the okay to travel to Australia early in the week, we, as in the Wrestling Observer, now know that the Riot Squad member will be competing as originally planned for WWE Super Showdown. So at least it was never announced of any changes. My understanding, after it happened, like let's see where this goes. It doesn't seem to be as serious possible, given on the information again that was given. And you know what? I'm happy for her. She's a tough cookie. She's a lot tougher than she looks. And still don't, well, I know it's a personal thing, but how Enzo Amore broke up with her, I'll never know. But again, that's, who wouldn't want, at least from a male's point of view, I want to have a tough cookie like Liv Morgan as your girlfriend, But I digress. So good news on her part. Obviously good news for the Riot Squad and all of their fans who stuck behind them. And hopefully there won't be a repeat. But knowing WWE, I wouldn't put anything past them, as they may or may not repeat the spot. Of course, in a more safer conditions, where if they're going to have an advantage and eliminate Liv Morgan early or sometime in the middle of the match and have it once again a 3-on-2. Because eventually, and supposedly, this is when and where there's going to be the breakdown between Ronda Rousey and Nikki Bella, if the rumors are to believe that both women will face each other at Evolution for the Raw Women's title. Pretty much coming up soon, and at the end of the month. So they got to basically do a short-lived version of whatever storyline they came up with, if that's the case that they're going with. But you know what? Let's get into other types of news, because I have a lot to say here, and so little time to do it. So let's get started. Former WCW owner and old Vince McMahon rival, Ted Turner. This news actually broke last week, shortly after I put up the previous episode of the JM Report. And it's quite unfortunate, but Ted Turner has been diagnosed with Lewy body dementia. According to USA Today, the condition is the same that affected comedian Robin Williams in the last years of his life. Ted Turner revealed the condition in a CBS Sunday morning interview that took place last Sunday with Ted Koppel. Turner shared with Koppel, "It's a mild case of what people have as Alzheimer's. It's similar to that, but not nearly as bad. Alzheimer's is fatal. Thank goodness I don't have that." According to the Lewy Body Dementia Association, the disease affects an estimated 1.4 million individuals and their families in the United States alone. The disease is described as a progressive neurological disorder that attacks the areas of the brain responsible for behavior, convulsion, and movement. It's very unfortunate, as Ted Turner was putting aside what he's accomplished before he got involved with the wrestling business. I mean, he was the man, and I'm sure everyone's heard this by now, but he was the man responsible to have 24/7 all around the clock newscasts, that being CNN, before everyone else started following suit, like Fox News and CBS, and hell, even ESPN took a shot at that, although it's a bit of a separate entity. But the idea to have 24/7 and no longer have that overnight breaks where literally there was nothing on TV, you would just see those, those rainbow colored screens, and there'll be nothing on the air because they're setting up for the next morning around 6 a.m. But Ted Turner definitely was a pioneer when it comes to cable television. Of course, running TNT and TBS, where WCW originally aired, not Raw, but Nitro, who went head to head with Raw, and eventually Thunder, who then Smackdown went head to head with. And between Smackdown and Thunder, they've had such a crazy up and down when it comes to scheduling, what day of the week they would promptly be airing their TV shows, anywhere from Tuesday to Friday and back and forth. Usually it was on a Thursday, which I think would have made sense, but certain times of the year you had like example what's going on now with Thursday Night Football, and had Smackdown and or Thunder still be airing at those time slots, you definitely have a lot of competition. So I think it worked out for everybody. Eventually, once at least Smackdown settled with Fridays, and Thunder, I think Thunder always remained on Thursdays. I could be wrong. I just can't remember. But all those episodes between Nitro and Thunder are finally up on the WWE Network. I'm trying here and there to catch up on a few episodes that I missed out on from the original airing, but no one cannot deny the impact Ted Turner has had in media in general. And there is apparently there's a shoot interview out there with Ted Turner where he's discussing his experience during the Monday Night Wars. I'm not aware who conducted it. Unfortunately, it's broken up into pieces all over YouTube. So I'm trying to catch them in order, if possible, and more efficiently, the entire piece as a whole. But if anyone knows where I can find the whole interview, place them down in the comments, and if possible, the link itself, and let me know. Pieces of it. I first became aware of that shoot interview where it was on the WWE Network. Who was it about? It definitely wasn't one of the Monday Night Wars episode. There was another network special covering WCW superstars jumping, and I can't remember the name of it, but that's where I saw it. There was a piece of it, basically Turner describing the decision that he made to get into the business and buy out WCW from Jim Crockett. Well, it was Jim Crockett Promotions that became WCW, and the name WCW came from the actual TV show that was already named World Championship Wrestling. So instead of reshuffling too much or the names around, they just stuck with World Championship Wrestling and eventually ended up using the initials as a rivalry to the World Wrestling Federation, or WWF at the time. And this man definitely deserves a spot in the Hall of Fame, that being with the WWE. I mean, if Vern Gagne can get into the Hall of Fame, and for a long time, he was probably one of Vince McMahon's most stubborn rivalries. And I say that because if everyone else, including his own talent, are saying at the time that the AWA is all but done, but Gagne just wanted to move forward. He didn't believe it, or there was still possibilities that it could shine again, the American Wrestling Association. But eventually that was bought out. More so the video library that's now available also on the network. I'm not being sponsored. I'm just pointing out facts here. So I wish the sponsor part. But point being that Gagne ended up being in the Hall of Fame, and he in a humorous way took shots at Vince McMahon, all with a smile on his face. But it was all done in good faith and in good nature. So there isn't any backstage legit heat with the Ganyans and the McMahons. And eventually we all know Eric Bischoff will get in. He was the middleman. Many people seem to forget that or just flat out ignore it. Bischoff basically used Turner's money, and of course he would word it differently, being the network's money, or it wasn't Ted Turner's. Ted Turner owned the network, that being Ted Turner's money. So call it whatever you want. It's coming out of Turner's pocket, and he's the one signing the checks to whether get the primetime Nitro show originally off the air, not off the air, but on the air, but off the ground to get on the air, and eventually sign off on WWF wrestlers that eventually jumped ship. And I don't think Turner was involved with all or any of the individual negotiations. Maybe with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, maybe. That was never really addressed. That was something I would ask if and when Turner was ever directly involved with any of the negotiations with the wrestlers that jumped ship to WCW. But at the end of the day, it's his money. And can you really blame Nash? I mean, if it's possible, hell, if it's even available, and if you're game, that anytime anyone that signs after me and they end up making more money than I do, my contract automatically jumps to that same amount. So when Bret Hart jumped ship, I hope Kevin Nash, that is, gave Bret Hart a high five. Like, hey, I'm making just as much money as you are, thanks to you. But it's a cluster washing machine of a lot of things as far as what really happened. I'm not saying everyone's not telling the truth, although that is a possibility, but everyone comes from different angles when it comes to how they came to their contracts and what stipulations or what clauses they may have. Of course, most famously, the one of having Hulk Hogan include, I should say, creative control. And that itself, don't want to get off on a tangent here, but that probably was one of the reasons that led to the lawsuit between himself, Bischoff, and Russo after Bash at the Beach 2000. Makes you wonder why Bret Hart didn't sue for that when he was screwed, and that he had creative control. He wanted things done one way, his way, and then ended up doing something else. It's a complete mess. But if you have creative control and use it when you can or want to, hopefully it's not abused. But at the end of the day, if it's something your heart is really set for and you really want in a certain way, then contractually you're legally binded to it, and the company should follow it and let it be, and fix up or change whatever clusters that came out of it later on. You get back to it to save face if need be, but it is what it is. But my point being that Ted Turner does deserve a spot in the Hall of Fame. If not with WWE, then definitely in the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame in general. And then comes the question, who would induct him? I'm sure right now many are saying, well, Vince McMahon should do it. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Vince McMahon, I'm sure there could be other possibilities on a few other runner-ups, maybe Bischoff, maybe Hogan, maybe maybe Bret Hart himself, who knows. But definitely someone who worked closely and was affiliated or associated with Ted Turner for those many years during the Monday Night Wars. Well, Raw was war. And definitely at least think about it, whomever it is. Or maybe it could be his ex-wife, Jane Fonda. I don't know what terms they're all in now after their divorce, but Jane Fonda, she was by his side for a long, long time. She was there when Hulk Hogan was signed. She was there, I believe, had to have been Bash at the Beach where Hogan took on Ric Flair, and they were sitting ringside for his debut match. I was thinking of the Nitro debut, but I don't remember them sitting there, but definitely at the Bash at the Beach. So Ted Turner, hopefully things work out for him in the long run. If you missed the CBS Sunday morning show interview with Ted Koppel, it's already up on YouTube. You can catch up there and find out more on what he's been up to. But let's try to move on here for some more enlightening news. SmackDown 1000 seems to be gearing up for a very big show. and another piece of news that broke after I got off the air last time, and I'll mix that in here with the other news that's in relations to SmackDown 1000. So WWE is trying to get Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson to appear at SmackDown's 1000th episode, while a personal appearance would be the idea for the event. It looks like the WWE might have to settle for a recorded spot or maybe a via satellite spot, as The Rock is currently filming Hobbs and Shaw, the spinoff to Fast and the Furious. Nothing is set in stone, although both parties prefer for it to be a surprise, meaning that the surprise appearance of The Rock is what they're going for, but the rumor's already out there, so anything can happen. And with The Rock's busy schedule as of late, it would be a pro wrestling miracle for The Rock to appear at any point during SmackDown 1000. And in relating news, this was literally put out there moments after I left the studios last week, and I was like, you got to be kidding me. And I was even asking if there was anything else left to report, but at the time there really wasn't much, especially with all the preparations for the go home shows for Super Showdown, and they were what they were. I'll get into the closing segment of Raw in a bit. SmackDown, it's all right, but WWE.com announced that the legendary Evolution stable, not the pay-per-view, but the four members of Batista, Randy Orton, Triple H, and Ric Flair will be reuniting at SmackDown 1000 for their historic episode, airing on October 16th from Washington, D.C. Also rumored, but this was more confirmed locally and in Washington, D.C., as Michelle McCool and Tori Wilson are being advertised to appear at SmackDown 1000 by their website of Capital One Arena. So along with Evolution, Michelle McCool, also Vicky Guerrero and Teddy Long are confirmed to appear at SmackDown 1000. A little bit of a different news for Edge. Right now, there's a 50-50 chance of him appearing. And it's also heavily rumored at this point that this is where and when Rey Mysterio will make his heavily rumored return to WWE. Even though Edge denied the rumors, but so did Batista. Even though I think in Batista's case, I think between the two stories, I think Batista's was more legit, as for a very long time, WWE did not reach out to him. And whether it was coincidence that Batista answered a tweet from a fan asking Batista whether or not he'll be at SmackDown 1000, and Batista basically answered or replied, I wasn't invited, even though it's in my hometown. I just didn't get the invite. And about a week and a half later, he gets the call, most likely from Triple H himself, and he's going back to SmackDown, at least for one night only. I'm sure there'll be negotiations or maybe a meeting taking place for Big Dave to return or do something with WWE, as many of us, including myself, would love to see him back. If a short run, but a run, any kind of run would suffice me. Edge is 50-50 as of now because he shot down those rumors a while ago, and his podcast with Christian's on hiatus at this time. And the similarities there, that both men basically denied it again, but though Batista's was more legit. So there's a 50-50 chance of Edge showing up. With or without Christian is also up in the air, but they're trying to gather as much names as possible. Hopefully it won't be anything similar to Raw 25, where he had all these names, he had all these appearances, and literally that was it. They just, hi, they wave, and they're done. You never see or hear from them again. Now, I say that because not that I expect them to get involved in every single angle or storyline that goes on, but they can do a lot more than just stand on stage and wave and smile, is what I'm saying. That whole APA card-playing game in the backstage area, where MVP of all people showed up. he wasn't even advertised leading up to Raw. And he was just there. And many people missed him because either they didn't recognize him with his shorter hair or no one pointed him out. But it is what it is. I just hope they took whatever mistakes they jotted down from Raw 25 that the fans were against or didn't approve much of. Like, well, we can't repeat that here on Smackdown 1000, which is literally months apart. You know, Raw 25 wasn't that long ago. It was back in March. And here we are in October. That was a March, 7 months later, give or take. So plenty of mistakes to learn from, and hopefully they would have learned from all of it. And of course, the biggest highlight of Raw 25 was the opening segment with Stone Cold Steve Austin, and that was it. That was really it. As I mentioned last week, the New World Order are set to reunite at the end of October at an event in Orlando, Florida, which has been public knowledge for some time now. And however, the WWE themselves on social media has begun promoting it. The actual NWO Too Sweet reunion tour being promoted on WWE.com and all of their social media outlets. And this will lead many to believe, now the fans that is, that this brings Hulk Hogan one step closer to reappearing on WWE television. So I bring this up in particular because I also mentioned another story last week of the WWE basically registering or renewing certain trademarks that were owned previously by WCW. Now, of course, WWE owns the WCW name and brand and everything, but along with it came others like Bash at the Beach, Halloween Havoc, and so on and so forth. And there was another trademark issue that I'll get into later on, but not relating to this story. And of course, one of the trademarks of last week's registration was New World Order and NWO, including their logos. So whether it's coincidence or the timing, or I'm going to lean more on coincidence, that I even mentioned how would this affect the reunion tour that has been ongoing, even mentioned in this report for some time, I believe for a couple of months now. Hulk Hogan was teasing it, and then it finally came through that on October 18th, is it? If I'm not confusing with the Evolution date, that Hogan, Scott Hall, and Kevin Nash will be joining him, and now the WWE is advertising it. So coincidence, or to just see the fact that maybe both can benefit from it. And I believe it does more Hogan and his whole team there than WWE would. And I don't think it's been done before, so I don't think Hogan would have any trouble now moving forward using the trademark names and logos for anything. I mean, he sells the merchandise in his store in Orlando at Hogan's Beach, and he's been doing that for some time as well. And Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, as on their end, on their websites, they promote it as well. I don't think they get any benefits out of it, or what's the word? Royalties out of it. So once I had to have talked to another, and something had to have been worked out. So either way, everyone is happy. And the fans that are attending, I'm not planning to attend. I've already met those gentlemen on more than one occasion. But I do plan, whenever there's the next time, I'm sure it will come real soon, especially between Hall, Nash, and X-Pac. If those three ever get together for another meet and greet or Q&A, I would print out on the digital printer the group photo that I took with them and have them autograph that. There was this nice trio picture of Hogan, Hall, and Nash from a few days ago holding up an autographed WCW championship belt already spray painted with the NWO initials. That I would print out and have them autograph it for me. So there's still opportunities to come later on. And speaking of trademarks and possible infringement, although there's no indication of it, but you'll be the judge. As many were confused when the MLW was able to run a War Games event earlier in the year, as it was assumed that the WWE had the trademark for the event. It turned out as this turned out not to be the case, as MLW owns two trademarks under the name of War Games. It's also not the first time that the company ran such an event, as they ran a War Games back in 2003. Regardless, the WWE was quite unhappy with this decision, and the WWE chose to retaliate in two different ways. One was the recent trademarking of several old WCW events, including WCW Thunder, NWO, New World Order, All-Star Wrestling, WCW Monday Nitro, World Championship Wrestling, Halloween Havoc, Fall Brawl, and Starrcade. That's just to name a few. So clearly, the company should have been more up to date with their trademarks, but this assures them that none of these will slip up through the cracks ever again, such as a War Games. Secondly, WWE has been in talks with key MLW talent about signing with them. However, many of their top superstars in MLW, such as Phoenix, Pentagon, and Shane Strickland, are under deals that do not allow them to go to WWE. That literally is in their contracts, believe it or not. So while no moves will be made in the short term, the long game appears to be snatching up some of their talent, that being WWE. So they're snatching up all of the old WCW original trademarked and licensed names of pay-per-views and TV shows for all to be under WCW umbrellas. MLW had, they legit had TV shows or pay-per-views themselves named after War Games, but during the time, no one owned it. And from what I looked up, neither at no point did MLW. They just used the name as for an event. So no legal actions could be taken, if anyone's thinking that. But if WWE were not too preoccupied with other things and whatever they were during the time that these trademarks were expiring, and I mentioned this last time as well, I had no idea that happened up until maybe in the early 2000s, that these trademarks and registrations or all rights reserved, if you will, these copyrights, they do expire. You got to stay on if you want to keep your business going and keep the money flowing in. But to find out that there's a second or third party using a similar name, if not dead right the exact name, and it's completely for something else, then somebody dropped the ball big time in WWE's side of things. So hopefully that clears up something. But again, you decide for yourselves. Is WWE in a panic mode to make sure everything is up to par, all the names and registration are updated, and they can keep moving forward? That's not to say that some of the old TV shows that they used to air, and this also came through the concussion lawsuit, but it was a separate trial of royalties given or owed, as many believe that they are, through the airings of whatever network specials or even old episodes such as Sunday Night Heat that was delayed for such a long time because a lot of the former WWE or WWE superstars that appeared on that show feel like they're owed royalties now. In a sense, now I don't know if there's a difference between the streaming service that it's on versus if it would air on a scheduled TV network. For example, TBS and TNT, Nickelodeon, Spike TV, well, it's Paramount Network now, but just to name a few of those networks, they air a lot of old episodes of old TV shows as far as back as the 80s, from what I've seen. And you will hear interviews from said actors in whichever sitcom or TV show, and they will say, yeah, I still get checks from those shows. They aren't as big as they used to be, but I still get checks. I remember it was the boyfriend in Scream 2. He was also in Tomcats. He played Nev Campbell's boyfriend in Scream 2, Jeremy something. I think he ended up marrying Rebecca Romijn, who plays Mystique in the X-Men movies. But I remember him specifically on an interview in New York saying that he still gets checks from all of his old movies that rerun on networks. So again, And yeah, I'm in the media business to a degree. You would think I would know something like this, but I'm sure there's someone out there much smarter than I am that will know whether or not, if there's a difference between that, what I just explained, versus what's on demand. Really, air it whenever you want. They have a set scheduled live streaming, but it's all a mix of any kind of shows, from pay-per-views to their own originals to documentaries or autobiography videos, whatever you want to call them. But on occasion, they do air those old Smackdown or Sunday Night Heat episodes, and you see these old faces. And the belief or the argument there is that, we deserve royalties. My face and likeness and all that stuff is appearing on your network, streaming network to be exact. So where's my cut? Someone out there, please, if you know the answer that I'm looking for, place it down in the comments below and smarten me up, as they say. But I do understand where they're coming from. From Raven, I think might have been one of, if not the first one to bring that up to argument. But I do understand and appreciate that. But I honestly do not know, is my answer. And that's probably one of the rare times you'll ever hear me say that, is I don't know. But let's move on, shall we? At first, it was being reported by Dave Meltzer that Adam Page turned down an offer from WWE to remain with the Bullet Club. With the Bullet Club. The Fame faction had some fun with this on their newest episode of Being the Elite, with Paige referring that he was sent boots and a note from an individual named H that said, "If you want to be an assassin, be more cerebral." However, it turns out, as earlier this week, matter of fact, it turns out that the story of Hangman Page rejecting the WWE contract offer isn't as clear as we initially thought it would be. The Wrestling Observer newsletter clarified in an initial report, and that while Page did pass on the WWE contract for now, he didn't exactly say no to it either, as Page reportedly told the WWE that he needs more time to think about it and to give them an answer. Dave Meltzer expects him being Page, to decide after the year ends. Many members of the Bullet Club, including Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, had their contracts all ending around the same time, or even early next year, 2019, and they've all stated that they'll make a decision together. Whether or not this is how exactly it plays out remains to be seen. And similar, and we've seen something like this, not as big, but previous Bullet Club members, such as Carl Anderson and Lou Gallows, they left together from Japan and were brought into WWE as, at the time, the hottest commodity. Pretty much, if you're Bullet Club members or affiliated or rivals of Bullet Club, you're automatically made, or at least given a name in that side of the world, and eventually gets back to the States. And you might want to watch this guy. And it's grown ever since, of course. Since then, Cody Rhodes, who's been storyline-wise in and out with Bullet Club, and the rivalries, they're together, they're not. And I'll have a story about Cody Rhodes as well a little bit later on. But interesting to see how things will play out. I also mentioned at least a couple of weeks ago here on the JM Report the names of a few wrestlers from around the world, not all associated with WWE, contracts expiring by the end of this year or very early next year. As early as early as 2019 Royal Rumble time. So maybe, but we always get to that point between Royal Rumble and WrestleMania time. We're always on a lookout to see whose contract has expired and who's going to jump ship, or who's re-signing or renewing, or who's coming in all together in WWE. I said it before and I'll say it again. Whoever are these new names that will come over, go straight to NXT. And if there's even a bit of enough elbow room on the main roster to move around, I mean, I guess to a point, guys like Finn Balor have been doing real well, even though he hasn't been seen on TV as of late, at least not on Raw anyway. I know AJ Styles went straight up to the main roster. He's becoming now a 2-time champion, and he's being used the way he is. I guess we'll find out how whether or not he returns to the state as champion after Super Showdown, and where he goes from there. But point being, he has been very successful. It took a while, but He's one of the top guys, and he's a real hard-working horse. I have a quote here from Dave Meltzer. There are those in the company pushing for the idea of the NXT TV show going for 2 hours because they have so much talent, and also to increase the time on their takeover shows. Again, a quote by Dave Meltzer. And this is only in the discussion stages right now. So this isn't a confirmation that NXT TakeOver or television program would extend anytime soon. There are certain pros and cons to their decision, but 2 hours would allow for more talent to be promoted. And I agree with that. SmackDown Live also shows that it's much easier to get through a 2-hour program rather than Raw's lengthy 3-hour show runtime, which is true. Why is it that with the longest show that they have on television, they do the shortest amount of things with, like this segments? If they're not wrestling or having a promo in the ring or backstage, they're just plugging away at this hashtags, plugging away at the next upcoming show. I mean, you got 3 hours. Extend it. Maybe put more. If they're really pushing the notion, it's sports entertainment. Okay, so freaking entertain us. I prefer most of that entertaining to happen in the ring. And if the go-to attitude is with, let's try a different kind of entertaining and go with fart jokes. I'm like, no. But that's just me. That's probably why I'm not there. This is probably why they won't hire me, because I would bring common sense to the table. And God forbid someone does that, they'll be fired just as fast as you drink your water. And a possible spoiler. So if you want to tune out for literally a minute here, I'll just read off one of WrestleVote's tweets from just early in the week. So give me 1 minute as of now. WrestleVote on Twitter is reporting that as of right now, the primary focus of Survivor Series seems to be shifting away from its original Raw versus SmackDown format of the past 2 years. So it's also likely that one of the key balances is a traditional Survivor Series elimination match, but this time contemplating between a team captained by Kurt Angle versus the team that will be captained by Baron Corbin for control over Monday Night Raw. Monday Night Raw. Why am I so tongue-tied? Speaking of water, it's because I don't have one with me right now. But that's the idea. Angle has been training for some time now for a comeback to get back into the ring. As of right now, he's considered a part-time status. And he's been off television all this time, and he has been spending time with his family, has been spending time in the gym, working out. So this wouldn't be too far-fetched. But right now, all focus is on Super Showdown and Evolution. But I think the week, if not the Raw leading into Evolution, would also start planting seeds for Survivor Series, because even between now and then will be a shorter amount of window, maybe like a 3-week period between Evolution and Survivor Series. So there's a lot of stuff coming up still. And tonight or this morning, depending what side of the world you live in, will be the kickoff for that. And this ends up being true, then yeah, I'll definitely love to see it. During an interview with, oh my goodness, I can't believe, I was really contemplating whether to share this story, but it's out there and a lot of people replied to it. So let me know what you think. But during an interview with Hannibal TV, Sid Vicious, or Sid Justice, or Psycho Sid, whatever you want to call him, had some startling remarks regarding Paige, the SmackDown general manager, not Paige from Bullet Club. But the WWE, that she should have been fired after her sex tape leaked last year. Now, Sid is no stranger to controversy, a la Arn Anderson and a pair of scissors, and many would agree that even this is, by his standards, is a little too far. And many fans responded negatively to the review. To the interview. Sid would go on to say, "I think it's the stupidest thing. But then again, it goes to how the business is. When the business is down like this, they will okay things like that. After that, I would not have had her on my TV shows. I would have fired her immediately. Let them go to dark matches or something, but don't make them a general manager of the show." Of course, the decision to make Paige the general manager wasn't necessarily related to the unfortunate privacy violation or invasion, if you will, of photos and videos that were leaked online nearly a year ago now. And if you remember the Usos and the New Day segment when they were doing a rap battle, I believe, and they acknowledged it, and the fans knew what they were talking about, but it was all done under in good faith. I would assume that Xavier Woods and Paige were given a heads up about it, unlike other incidences where it just came out of the blue and people got upset. But unfortunately, it happens, and there are ways to prevent it. But that's up to the individual. Just don't have. I'm not saying for no one not to do things like that in their own personal private time, whether it's with your wife, husband, girlfriend, boyfriend, whomever that you share those intimate moments with. I'm not saying don't pull out the camera or take a video. I mean, if there is such a thing as a honeymoon tape anymore, well, this is the newest thing now. Of course, if you're married, but in regular relationships, people become creative. My thing is, you got to be smart about it. And if you're going to keep it, know where to keep it. My suggestion, because I know anything or everything that I consider private, I'm not going to leave it laying around on my desktop. Sure as hell not on my phone, and definitely not on the flash drive. If you can, or if you don't have one already, get yourself a external hard drive and just cover it and lock it up with so many passcodes NASA can't even break into it. And it'll be just a mystery for the ages to know what the hell is in there. And that little, well, mine actually I got two, one for gaming and one for my work here, for example, and what I do at home. And it looks like literally a little black box. Who knows what's in there? But it's in this one I have here next to me is actually all my recordings, all my videos that I've ever done here at CSB Studios. And when I want to, I will share it with the world. But of course, a lot of it has to do with release forms being signed, which a lot of it will need for it to seen publicly. But something like a sex tape obviously is a little bit more dedicated than that, or delicate than that, I should say. Dedicated is more delicate than that, where obviously anyone who breaks in can care less of a release form. They're just putting it out there for a profit, which is the wrong way to do it. And as far as Paige, if you're wondering, Paige responded with a simple GIF tweet, basically saying whatever, which is the right kind of attitude to have, because she's obviously moved on from it, and she's mentioned that even in the Lillian Garcia podcast. I would say just a couple of months after all that happened, but how and why Paige was even named the GM of Smackdown, it was timing, because Daniel Bryan was leaving that position to get back into the ring. And at this almost at the same time, Paige went down with a neck injury and she would just not be cleared to return. She gave that heartwarming retirement speech on Raw, where all of her Absolution members left her in the ring all by herself, which I thought was a great nod to. And all of them on SmackDown now. But the very next night, Paige, right after that emotional speech, which I thought would have sufficed if it given a week in between, but WWE can't waste time, and she was announced immediately as the new general manager. She is still a talent, not performing in the ring, but on-air talent as a GM. She's nursing these injuries, and in her speech, hopefully, like she said, there's hope. Like Daniel Bryan had hope. It took him about 3 years, but he ended up coming back, and Bryan is still young enough to have a career such as. And Paige is definitely still young enough. And that's the other thing, how people forget she's just barely in the mid-20s, and she had all this stuff given to her, or she earned it in such a short amount of time, and basically ran into a brick wall, and it really sucks. But I hope she rebounds pretty soon, not too soon, but soon enough that she gets back into the ring safely and she can continue with her career. And speaking of comebacks and injuries, I got a couple of stories to share with you on that front. After spending nearly a year out of the ring, first due to her pregnancy and then with a broken wrist, Maria Kanellis announced on the Mike and Maria in the Woodland podcast, hosted by her husband and herself, that the doctors have cleared her to return to the ring. And the couple just gave birth not too long ago to the daughter. And back in April of this year, Maria was, late after the birth, obviously, not right away. But Maria, not too long ago, I believe was in July, I want to say July. She was already at the Performance Center, and she ended up injuring herself leading up to her broken wrist. So yet another setback, nothing too serious, but obviously Maria is gung-ho of returning again into the ring. Her husband, Mike Kanellis, has been seen on dark matches on Raw and Smackdown, so he's staying pretty active. Obviously, they don't have anything for him right now as far as main roster on-air storylines. And honestly, they made their debut on a Smackdown episode. I was just trying to figure out what their new gimmick is. I know they're this couple that can't just stop loving each other. They show off their affection in public. They got this 80s type love song for their entrance. And what would be a good fit for him now with anyone? Mike Kanellis, you can't really have him go after someone else's valet or wife. I mean, that wouldn't make sense. That would be completely the opposite of what he's doing now with Maria. If SmackDown is the place to do so, there are plenty of female managers or valets, if you will, that have experience in the ring, like Zelina Vega. They had something like that previously with Daniel Bryan and Brie Bella, but thankfully that stopped. They're not doing that anymore, thankfully. And that's not entirely on the Liv Morgan incident. I think that just ran its course. But maybe something for Mike and Maria on SmackDown would suffice them. What that something is right now I'm not too sure. There's just so many things going on. Hopefully Maria will be back on time for Evolution, which I think she does deserve a spot there for an on-air camera appearance. The former Emma, or the Tenille Dashwood, unfortunately has one of the most difficult 2008s so far. Earlier this week, she revealed that she's been suffering from psoriasis and has been since her childhood years. After performing at Death Before Dishonor and losing to Sumi Sakai, and eventually was written off television in a attack angle. But Dashwood would announce to the crowd of her condition and also suffering from a shoulder injury, or has been suffering from a shoulder injury for the past 6 months. So all of this caught up with her basically in one fell swoop, and now she needs time to recover in more ways than one, and hopefully she can come back soon. And I wish her all the best in recovery, to get well soon. She's scheduled for a meet and greet on November 10th, I believe it is, on a Saturday in New York City. Now, I know that's about a month away, and selfishly, I'm thinking that she can make it there so I can finally meet her, as I'm scheduled to fly out in New York for that weekend. And if she does, great, and I'll be sure to ask her myself on how she does. Maybe I stress that because everyone's different, and when it comes to their managers, agents, or handlers of time given to speak with them. But we'll see how it goes. I'll try to work my magic as best as possible. I mentioned Cody Rhodes earlier, and this man is becoming, how can I say? If JBL considered himself a wrestling god, Cody Rhodes at this point has to be, I don't know, the beyonder of wrestling, or the quickly becoming the end all, the be all. Cody Rhodes. I mean, this man, everything he touches turns to gold, and this week was no exception. As the NWA World Heavyweight Champion defeated Juice Robinson this past Tuesday night in New Japan Pro Wrestling's Fighting Spirit Unleashed event, winning their IWGP United States Championship. In the process, making Cody Rhodes, I think for the first time in a very long time, a double champion of two different brands. After using most of everything in his arsenal to beat Juice, it took his rare finisher, Dense Fire, to put him down once and for all. Cody Rhodes will also appear after the main event later on that night to confront the Golden Lovers of Kenny Omega and Kota Ibushi, as Omega considered facing Ibushi at the Sumo Hall next week, where Rhodes interjected and thought of it and that it would be better if all three competitors face each other in a triple threat match at King of Pro Wrestling on October 8th, as Omega agrees, and the IGWP Heavyweight Championship will be on the line. So Cody Rhodes has a chance to be a Triple Crown winner, literally, from the NWA and New Japan Pro Wrestling, as he will face Kenny Omega and Kota Ibushi for the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. Unbelievable. Simply unbelievable. And October 8th, I think also will be airing on at 5 in the morning. I'll try my best to catch this live, but and actually it's coming up this week. It's this coming Monday. I'm very booked when it comes to studio time and other projects, but I'll try my best. And I got one last story here, as I was going to share the Liv Morgan story, but I guess the timing of it. I try to organize these stories in a particular order, but sometimes I bring up a story getting ahead of myself, and I'm like, oh, well, I might as well just mention that. But the World Wrestling Network, or the WWN, have released a following statement through their social media alerts, and basically says, we know we have been down lately in the public, but big things are happening for the future of WWN behind the scenes. This is the quiet before the storm. We are back today with some major news. Let's get into it. As the WWE champion Joey Janela suffered a major knee injury and will be sidelined for several months. Regretfully, WWN officials have no choice but to strip Janela of the WWN Championship and wish Joey for a full recovery and a comeback real soon. We will welcome him back whenever he is ready. They will also go on to announce an upcoming Evolve show. Evolve will return to the Orphanarium in Ybor City, Florida on October 28th. The show will feature a tournament to crown the new WWN champion. We will have full details by next week. And stay tuned for more WWN news on social media such as Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and their website. For those who don't know, the World Wrestling Network, or the WWN, is one of those smaller companies that is affiliated with the WWE, similar to what NXT is. Many of the talent who are local, and they have house shows or live events through them. If it's not with WWN, they'll have it with WXW over at Miliona, Florida, which is run by the Wild Samoans. And they have it's quite interesting what the old days didn't really do much before, at least not publicly, I guess is the best way to describe it. But their talents can jump back and forth as long as the schedules don't conflict, and can be recognized in a more wider range audience. And I think that's a great concept, as I was able to, for a short time anyway, have a close affiliations with both sides of WXW and the WWN. And it turns out when it came to meet some of the students training, I would meet them somewhere else at the other school, or I've just come to find out that they train at both ends, in Largo, Florida, and in Mineola. So it's quite interesting, and I wish they could do more of this elsewhere, but it is what it is. But as far as Joey Janela, I didn't mention that he suffered a severe knee injury last week, and we learned by a MRI that Joey Janela had to eventually, as the statement released by WWN, relinquish the WWN Championship, as both his PCL and MCL were heavily damaged and torn in his knee. Since then, Joey Janela has met with a surgeon and has more of an idea of a better timetable, and he has announced he will be out of action for at least a year. It's a really long time. Hopefully he can pick up his momentum by the time he does return. And Joey Janela would write out on his Twitter saying that it's really heartbroken and he feels really bad. Well, the damage is really bad. Janela is set to have surgery sometime next week. And the surgeon, this is where he says that, surgeon said that the damage is really bad. However, Janela isn't letting this get to him, doesn't feel like this should bring him down. He would also share, "The voyage has never been easy for me." And then he would be quoting an iconic rock band of AC/DC and said, "It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll." That's great spirits to be in, especially if you're a Joey Janela fan. I know a lot of people who have suffered such injuries that kept them out of their sport that they love so much with a passion that they'd rather just go back in injury and all. But the doctor's always right, at least 9 out of 10 times, and it's better safe than sorry. So Joey Janela, I wish you all the best as well, to get well soon and return to do what you do best. And I believe it's through that relationship is how and when, and maybe even where Joey Janela can get some kind of communications with NXT. Maybe, somehow. For those who don't, I think I shared this before, but just in case I didn't. Basically, whenever you see an extra talent on air, whether they're playing a police officer or EMT or firefighter, whomever, chances are, and especially if they're going to take a bump somehow, chances are they're local talent. And when Smackdown was last here in Tampa, was it Tampa? I think, no, I'm sorry, when they were in Orlando, they had the Bludgeon Brothers beat up these 3 local talents, and a lot of the folks online gave them a lot of crap because they didn't know who they were. They were making fun of their appearances. Yeah, those guys, they were all from Alpha School, or Alpha and Seeker, matter of fact, the Wild Samoans Pro Wrestling Training Center out in Mineola. And there was quite a nice piece done backstage between SmackDown and NXT of that week, where all the talent was invited. And I'm actually, when I finish here, matter of fact, and I'll end the show with this, that I'm just putting on the finishing touches on my little documentary I put together involving WXW and the Wild Samoan Training Center. Hopefully, when I present it to them, that they like it. And like it so much that they will give me the permission to release it to the public in some form or fashion. This is where release forms are very important, folks. You just can't do something and put it out there on social media and call it something that it's really not without the involving parties being aware of it. You know, you can face legal actions that no one wants to be in. Believe me when I say that. So I hope they like it. And again, I will announce, hopefully by the time I come back here for episode 30, that they gave the okay. But I first have to meet them sometime this week. So hopefully, definitely before I leave from New York. I know it's a whole month away, but a lot could happen. And hopefully that they give me the good news and I can put it up somewhere, and I'll let you guys know where to find it. And let me know what you think of it. I'm pretty proud of it. I put 5 months worth of work in it since I originally started recording. I did interviews. I was able to find a lot of footage that they were discussing and describing in the videos themselves. And with their permission, use a lot of their social media pictures and other sources that they describe and able to put together. And I've always appreciated and admired the Samoan culture. And when it came down to finding, I guess, a soundtrack for my piece, it just reminded me again how soothing and even at times how emotional Samoan music can be. And it almost choked me up because if you guys get a chance to watch it towards the end of this piece, you'll understand why. And again, I hope they like it, and I hope you like it when you guys ever see it. So with that said, I'm going to wrap up here and get back to work on that piece and finish up once and for all. So thank you for joining me. I know it's been another bit of a short episode this time, but I was able to jam in a lot of stories out there that really make the airways. I'm sure you're noticing I'm not covering Raw and SmackDown as of late, but I really should be, but maybe it's just the stubbornness in me that the shows can be unbearable at times, that it doesn't deserve a review, even though I kind of pointed out at least one segment early in the week for the intro for this episode. But I'm going to try. I really am. And not to mention other shows that happen during the week, such as NXT and, of course, upcoming New Japan show this coming Tuesday. If I can't watch it, then I obviously have to look up the results and find out for myself what happened and bring it to you. So with that said, thank you for joining me. This is GoodOlJM. Everyone else, enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the rest of Friday. Hey, it's Friday. You know what that means. Thank God. And everyone, be safe, and I'll see you next time.